first number to come from the draw drawer.
Can you believe it, Annie? Number 7. When you're coming out of that, we got the first 4.
You're having me on.
Our fifth number to piece is 25. 25.
Annie, we've got it. Jeez, Jackie. That's 5. God help us, God help us.
Hey, Olivia Rutigliano. I am so honored to have you here on Underexposed. Olivia, for those who don't know, is a fabulous film commentator and writer based here in New York. She serves as editor at the arts and culture publication LitHub, as well as editor at Crimereads, their sister publication, and editor at Grove Atlantic, where she acquires new books in the mystery and crime genre, which she specializes in. And when I say specialize, I mean she has a newly minted PhD from Columbia University in the subject. As if that's not enough, Olivia also is well known for moderating amazing conversations, both about film and about literature here in New York at places like Film Forum and the McKittrick Hotel, home of Sleep No More. Olivia, thank you for being here on Underexposed.
Thank you for having me, Alex. This is a dream come true. I mean, this is not only is this podcast, Substack, newsletter experiment of yours so exciting and wonderful, but your work is also extraordinary. And I'm so honored to be in your company, not only to appear on a Zoom with you, but also to have many wonderful conversations about film and TV and entertainment.
It was like one of those movies you hear about or you see the title of everywhere, but I had never personally seen it until last night. And I was delighted to finally be exposed to this movie. I'm so excited to talk about it with you. But before we get into that, I guess we should give a little bit of like the Wikipedia summary of what this movie is. So I'll just rattle that off real quick. Waking Ned Devine is a 1998 Irish comedy written and directed by Kirk Jones. When word reaches Jackie O'Shea and Michael O'Sullivan, two elderly best friends, that someone in Tullamore, a tiny Irish village of 52 people, has won the Irish National Lottery, they, along with Jackie's wife Annie, plot to discover the identity of the winner. And the less said about the movie from there is probably for the best, because it's such a fun movie to discover. It goes in directions that I was not expecting at all. I guess we're going to have to get into spoiler territory, but just be warned.
Well, now we've done the part where someone can pause the broadcast and go watch it and then catch up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So Olivia, tell me why you chose this movie and what you love about it.
It's one of my favorite movies to introduce to people. I am so, I'm so excited all the time because I have so many wonderful friends who are, if they're not literally in the film industry like you, Alex, they're very film literate. So it's not often that I get to present people with a film that they've not seen before, or in some cases haven't even heard of. Nature of the film is it takes something that is so unbelievably real, which is the dwindling populations of Irish villages, small Irish villages. There are 52 people in this village in a movie that takes place in the late 90s. And it takes that and it applies fairy tale logic around something that is in the real world a real fairy tale, which is winning the lottery. Obviously it can happen. It does not happen. It's one in a, billion or whatever the ridiculous odds are. But someone in this 52-person village wins the lottery and kicks off a series of wonderful adventures that unlocks the almost childlike, very whimsical, wonderful personalities and stakes. And it's a wonderful thing. I remember when I first saw it, how enchanted I was by it. And British cinema is not talked about in like the way that new American cinema is, especially British cinema of the 80s and 90s, which was very, very revolutionary in many ways and technical and narrative levels and in terms of social commentary. And you have the rise of auteurs like, Guy Ritchie and Waking Ned Devine, which is made by a British director and it's an Irish film. It isn't sort of always included in these conversations. And I hope to rectify that with today's conversation.
And I'm so glad you did. And I love that you brought up fairy tale logic, because that's something, I mean, people will see this movie and they'll immediately assume that it's going one direction, but one of the most unique traits of this film is that it just defies expectations almost every few minutes of the film. It just curves left when you think it's going to go right. And so, yeah, I totally agree. It is fairy tale logic, but it doesn't play out, I think, like most, I guess, American audience might expect it to. You're expecting a comedy of errors and it swerves into something entirely different, which some people, I believe, might be frustrated by. But here on Underexposed, we just love that kind of stuff. It's part of a genre that I'm only formally identifying now, which is the village comedy. I guess that's been around, but you can put movies like, if you've seen movies like Local Hero or like most recently, I guess like Banshees of Inisherin would fit in that box. The Wicker Man sort of straddles that genre in a weird way. How do you think this movie fits in or defies that genre?
It's such a fascinating question. And I like how here on Underexposed, we're pushing genre boundaries and making new ones. I think the village comedy, yes, the village comedy is such a useful corral for us to place this film in and gives it such wonderful bedfellows. Like even the early Edgar Wright, like, you know, Blood and Ice Cream saga. In this genre, there's magic or there are rules that sort of don't apply outside a space that is fundamentally remote or peopled by the same number of characters that would be in a Samuel Beckett play.
It's got one of the best, I think, first scenes of any movie I've ever seen, which is a 3-minute scene that just catapults you into the story logic, into this world, and it kind of pulls the rug out at the end in a way like, you know, an old Swedish or Norwegian joke does about Sven and Oli or whatever. You know, it's got that vibe, it's got that flavor, which I'm all for. And as for what it has to say, it kind of doesn't tell you exactly, or maybe I'm not smart enough to decipher it. Also, it's kind of beside the point. I mean, a movie like this is exactly the kind of movie that we're missing these days for the most part, in the sense that it is, to use that awful word, quaint and cozy, and like a warm 90-minute kind of cup of tea, feel good. Maybe you're not like cackling the whole time, but you definitely have a smile on your face the whole time you're watching this movie. I miss that. And I think a lot of people out there miss that. And this is a really fun one to check out if that's your vibe.
I think it's also wonderful how the characters you meet sort of take on different implications as the movie develops. Like there's a character who seems sort of like a curmudgeon who turns out to almost straight up be a witch. And, you know, at the end of the movie might or might not achieve a level of, I don't know, punishment that is commensurate not with the first categorization we have of her, but the latter, which is of the witch. Like people get rewarded and punished according to the most exaggerated qualities they possess, not the simple ones. And I find that very interesting.
Absolutely. Really well said. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I think like you just don't know what world you're in ever fully, which is a great feeling. And I think it's what helps this movie resist some of those associations that people have made with, I guess, Irish literature to the extent that I know it. But I think what I'm more familiar with is kind of the quaint, folksy, feel-good village story, which at its worst can be kind of a cloying or sentimental or something like that. This movie offers up moments, doesn't like linger in them, but there's some gruesome stuff that happens. There's some kind of Weekend at Bernie's antics that happen here. It's
a little brutal at times.
You just never know what you're going to get. Things that are really goofy happen for no apparent other reason other than it's just like a goofy thing. You don't know. I don't know. It's just got this tone that's impossible to pin down, which is what makes the movie, I think, so alive.
One of the things I'm thinking about is I always love when there's a character who has a sort of like bard function where there's a wise man who you can look to for answers or who you can look to for interpretation, and who sort of provides in some cases the film's thesis, or in other cases mysterious musings that can help corral the theme. And the thing about Waking Ned Devine is that character is a child and is constantly stumps the other figures in the film who should have answers, the old, his parent, his mother, his all of the old people in the village, and the priest. And in films that take place in a village, more often than not, and I'm thinking of mysteries even like Father Brown, but like the ecclesiastic person is usually the one with a sense of the mystic or a sense of the spiritual or the universal or something wise that can help understand what we're all doing here and how we're functioning. And instead, this child who's asking all these metaphysical questions sort of is baffling everyone, and nobody knows any answers. And I think that's a really wonderful way to turn that convention on its head in a way that does underscore the thesis of Waking Ned Devine, which is like, you don't know what you're going to get next, and there's no use trying to explain it. And we're operating on a kind of fairy tale logic, yes, but the fairy tale logic is in a way an allegorical representation of what real world logic is. Like, you might think that this film takes place in a microcosm where rules don't apply, but rules also don't always apply in the real world too.
Absolutely. Very well said. It's interesting that the priest is missing from the story and arrives at the end. It's an injured priest that the boy is talking to.
Right. There's a replacement priest. Yeah. And there's, exactly.
I love that moment early in the film when the boy is talking to the interim priest about joining the clergy. And he says, why would I want to work for someone I can't even see and work for free or something like that? It's hilarious.
It's a good question too.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think you could be drawn to the church, Morris?
I don't think so.
Well, you never know.
I don't think I could work for someone I'd never met and not get paid for it.
What do you make of the other subplot of this movie, the Maggie pig farmer
Finn?
subplot? Yeah, Finn. Yeah. What do you make of that? How does that tie into everything for you?
Look, I love a B plot. I think there's a way that Waking Ned Devine borrows so much from a sort of like romantic opera buffa, light opera tradition, almost Mozart, which is the understanding that a good story has an A plot and a B plot. And like, you can go all the way back to the magic flute, or like earlier in like certain, strains of, or, extant remains of commedia scripts, like, or formulas. Like, there's the main lovers, and then there are the comic lovers. I think the interesting thing about Waking Ned Devine is that not only does it balance its A plot and its B plot, but it switches the stakes, because the comic lovers of the B plot are given to the A plot. And the love story at the center of the film is between two best friends, Jackie O'Shea and Michael O'Sullivan. And they adore each other. They've been best friends forever. And Michael is a widower, and Jackie is not. He's married to Annie, who is, the great Fionnuala Flanagan. The movie is about their relationship a little bit, and how, as Annie becomes involved in Michael, and really Jackie's plotting, and he brings along Michael, and he sort of brings along Annie. Their love story also grows, but principally the love story at the center of this film is between Jackie and Michael. But that's our principal one. Whereas the B love story, which is between a beautiful young woman in the village who is an occasional poet and a man who is a pig farmer, and she loves him very much, but he smells like pigs. And it's impossible for her to be around him without her retching, because he smells like manure. That is such a very fascinating and charming, like, part of the story to give. And I think it performs a really interesting function that a lot of the opera buffas do, which is that it starts to build a world around the characters. If you're setting a film in a village or among several characters on an adventure, you can't just get to know the main ones. You also have to understand how the implications of what's going on in the film will affect other characters. But this one is really fascinating because it's almost, except for the pig joke, like, it's not really a comic love story. It's a very sincere one. They're sort of our traditional, like, innamorati, the main lovers, the young lovers, but they get sort of sidelined. And so I think in one way it represents how Waking Ned Devine is constantly redrawing and remapping a lot of the rules of, like, Western comedy and what we see. But in another sense, I think it's also fascinating how it uses this sort of sincere, almost serious love story as a sounding board for the implications of what Jackie and Michael are scheming, and how that will play out and affect the village. There's sort of our case study for that.
And the A story and B stories weave together at the end in a very unexpected and
Very unexpected way.
somewhat unsettling way, but it's perfect tonally.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, I almost actually missed that the first time when I was in high school, and when I rewatched it,
well, they kind of just breeze past it, and you're like, wait a minute, like what? Like, excuse me. Anyway,
what? Yeah.
we'll leave that mysterious. You all can discover it for yourselves. But I also want to bring up the tradition and ask you if you think this movie sits in the tradition of another genre of movie, which I call like the lottery movie, of which there are many examples, but the one that sticks out to mind, the one that like my mind immediately leapt to when this movie started, was Christmas in July, the Preston Sturges screwball comedy.
I've seen half of it. I mean, the lottery comedy is such a fascinating genre too. I mean, that movie asks sort of, if you had, infinite resources, what would you do and who would you become? How would you change your life? I mean, it's not a lottery movie, but it is sort of like a luck of the draw movie. I mean, also the recent movie, Glenn Powell and Richard Linklater's recent movie, Hitman, too, which is like, there are circumstances provided which cause someone to change who they are. And the circumstances are somewhat random. It's not a lottery win, but it is sort of the same cosmic intervention, let's say, or there's some sort of luck or fortune or misfortune or change, in the atmosphere that causes the circumstances to present themselves in which someone changes their life for them. Christmas in July is a really interesting one. I'm also thinking there's a Kristen Wiig movie from like 15 years ago, maybe, called Welcome to Me. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't know that one.
It's about a mentally unstable woman who wins the lottery and uses her money to make like an Oprah style talk show. Like that's her dream. I'm also thinking of, I'm just looking up the.
While you're doing that, I was thinking also it's kind of an inversion in a way of Treasure of the Sierra Madre, in the sense that a big fortune is amassed suddenly in like the beginning, and instead of everybody turning against each other, it becomes this massive cooperation amongst not only the main characters, but everybody except for one person in the village, which is really refreshing and unexpected and exciting.
Yeah. I mean, you can rarely ever get 51 people to agree on anything, and that's what happens. I was also thinking of Brewster's Millions too, which is like, you spend 30 million and however many days you can inherit 300 million or something like that. Like there's I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Brewster's Millions, so I don't think I can adequately analyze it here, but yes, but exactly what you point out, that the logic of Waking Ned Devine is not one of like fractious descent into discord, but one of solidarity and ultimate cooperation in a way that almost feels more like a heist movie than something else. I mean, like the big lottery movie that I think of is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
Yeah.
It's the, epitome of it's the epitome of the competitive comedy, and Waking Ned Devine is so the opposite. It is Waking Ned Devine is beautiful in its representation of a true community, and how that community will band together for the greater good, even if the greater good is a little self-serving or a little illegal or very illegal. And the lone dissenter does not dissent because of a great sense of right or wrong, but due to selfishness.
Right.
And, there's just sort of this understanding that like everything that the people are doing in the community might technically be illegal, but is like morally above board because everyone will benefit. It's like this great socialist, like platonic ideal socialist twist. Like there's like this wonderful redistribution of wealth in which absolutely everyone benefits and everyone is able to like go survive and sustain the life of this town that would otherwise be, depreciating. And it's so beautiful.